Some elementary lessons of psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud. Some elementary lessons of psychoanalysis. An author who intends to introduce some branch of knowledge, or to put it more modestly, some branch of research, to an uninstructed public must clearly make his choice between two methods or techniques. It is possible to start from what any reader knows, or thinks he knows, and considers self-evident without contradicting it from the start. An opportunity will soon present itself to call your attention to some facts in the same field, which, though known to you, you have neglected or imperfectly appreciated. Starting with them, one can introduce more facts to him of which he is unaware and thus prepare him to go beyond his first judgments, to seek new points of view and to consider new hypotheses. In this way he can be led to take part in the construction of a new theory about the subject, and his objections to it can be known during the course of joint work. A method of this class could be called genetic. Follow the path that the investigator himself has followed before. Despite all its advantages, it has the defect of not making a very strong impression on the learner. You won't be as impressed by something you've seen come into existence and go through a difficult period of growth as you would be by something presented ready-made as an apparently closed whole. It is precisely this latter effect that the alternative method of presentation produces. This other method, the dogmatic one, begins by stating its conclusions. Its premises demand the attention and faith of the audience, and very little is adduced in support of them. And then there is the danger that a critical listener will shake his head and say, "This all sounds very peculiar, where did this guy get it from?" In what follows I will not limit myself to either of the two methods of presentation. Sometimes I will use one, other times another. I have no illusions about the difficulty of my task. Psychoanalysis has little chance of becoming liked or popular. It's not just that a lot of what he has to say offends people's feelings. Almost a similar difficulty is created by the fact that our science embraces a certain number of hypotheses. It is difficult to say whether they should be regarded as postulates or as products of our investigations, which are liable to appear very foreign to ordinary modes of thought and which fundamentally contradict current views. But you can't avoid this. We must begin our brief study with two such risky hypotheses. The nature of the psychic. Psychoanalysis is a part of psychology. It is also described as depth psychology. We'll find out why later. If someone asks what the psychic really means, it is easy to reply by enumerating its constituents: our perceptions, ideas, memories, feelings, and volitional acts. All of them are part of the psychic. But if the questioner goes further and asks if there is not some common quality possessed by all these processes which makes it possible to come closer to the nature or, as people sometimes say, to the essence of the psychic, then that is more difficult to answer. If a physicist were asked a similar question, regarding the nature of electricity, for example, his answer until very recently would have been, in order to explain certain phenomena we assume the existence of electrical forces, that they are present in things and emanate from them. We study those phenomena, discover the laws that govern them, and dispose of them for use. This satisfies us provisionally. We do not know the nature of electricity. Perhaps we will discover it one day as our work progresses. We have to admit that what we are ignorant of is precisely the most important and interesting part of the whole question, but for the moment this does not concern us. This is simply how things happen in the natural sciences. Psychology is also a natural science. What else can it be? But his case is different. No one is bold enough to make judgments about physical matters, but everyone, the philosopher and the man in the street alike, has his opinion on psychological problems and behaves as if he were at least an amateur psychologist. And now comes the remarkable thing. Everyone, or almost everyone, agrees that the psychic really has a common quality in which its essence is expressed, the quality, unique, indescribable, but needing no description, of being conscious. Everything that is conscious, they say, is psychic, and, conversely, everything that is psychic is conscious. This is self-evident, and to contradict it is nonsense. It cannot be said that this decision sheds much light on the nature of the psychic, because consciousness is one of the fundamental facts of our life and our investigations stumble upon it and cannot find a way behind it. Moreover, the equating of what is psychic with what is conscious had the undesirable result of divorcing psychic processes from the general context of events in the universe and setting them in stark contrast to all others. But this would not be the case, since one could not ignore the fact that psychic phenomena depend to a high degree on somatic influences and for their part have the most powerful effects on bodily processes. If ever human thought has found itself in a dead end, it is here. To find a way out, philosophers were forced to assume that there were organic processes parallel to conscious psychic processes, related to them in a way that is difficult to explain, acting as intermediaries in the reciprocal relations between body and mind, which it served to reinsert the psychic into the texture of life. But this solution was unsatisfactory. Psychoanalysis escaped difficulties of this type by vigorously denying the equality of the psychic and the conscious. No, conscious being cannot be the essence of what is psychic. It is only a quality of what is psychic, and certainly an inconstant quality, which is often absent rather than present. The psychic, whatever its nature, is itself unconscious and probably of a similar kind to all other natural processes of which we have some knowledge. Psychoanalysis bases its statements on a certain number of facts, from which I will now give a selection. We know what we mean when we say that some thought ideas occur to one that suddenly appear in consciousness without our perceiving the steps that led to them, although they must also have been psychic acts. It may even happen that we arrive by this road at the solution of some difficult intellectual problem which before, for some time, had ridiculed our efforts. The entire complicated process of selection, rejection, and decision that has occupied the interval has been out of consciousness. It is not a new theory to say that they were unconscious and perhaps also continued to be so. Second, I will take a simple example to represent an immensely large class of phenomena. The president of a public corporation, the Assembly of Deputies of the Austrian Parliament, once opened a session with the following words: "I notice that a sufficient number of deputies are present, and therefore I declare the session finished." It was a verbal slip, because there is no doubt that what the president meant was open. Why then did he say otherwise? We expect to be told that it was an accidental mistake, a failure to carry out an intention, as can easily happen for various reasons. It had no meaning, and in any case the opposites are easily substituted for one another. But if we take into account the situation in which the verbal slip occurred, we are inclined to prefer other explanations. Many of the previous sessions of the assembly had been unpleasantly stormy and accomplished nothing, so it was natural for the president to think at that moment in making his public statement, if only the session, which is in its infancy, had been over. Finished. I would rather lift it than open it. When he began to speak, he was probably not aware of this desire, it was not conscious to him, but he was certainly present and could manifest himself, against the will of the speaker, in his apparent mistake. A single example cannot allow us to decide between two different explanations. But what would we say if all verbal mistakes could be explained in the same way and in the same way, and also all written mistakes, every reading or hearing mistake, and all wrong actions? What would we say if in all these examples, we could say without any exception, it were possible to demonstrate the presence of a psychic act, a thought, a desire, or an intention that would explain the apparent mistake and that it was unconscious at the moment in which it was made? Performed, even though it may have been previously conscious? If this were so, it would no longer really be possible to continue denying the fact that there are psychic acts that are unconscious and that sometimes they are even active while they are taking place. Unconscious, and even in this case they can sometimes considerably influence conscious intentions. The person who has suffered a mistake of this kind may react to it in various ways. You may miss it completely, or you may notice it and be confused and embarrassed. Usually she cannot find the explanation by herself and without the help of others, and often refuses to accept the explanation when it is placed before her for at least some time. Thirdly, finally, it is possible, in the case of people in a hypnotic state, to prove experimentally that there are such things as unconscious psychic acts and that awareness is not an indispensable condition for psychic activity. Anyone who has witnessed one of these experiments will receive an unforgettable impression and a conviction that will never be shaken. This is more or less what happens. The doctor enters the hospital room, puts his umbrella in the corner, hypnotizes one of the patients and says, "Now I'm leaving. When I return, you will meet me with my open umbrella and hold it over my head." Then the doctor and his assistants leave the room. As soon as they return, the patient, no longer under hypnosis, carries out exactly the instructions given to him while under hypnosis. The doctor asks, "What are you doing? What does this mean?" The patient is clearly confused. He makes some unwelcome remark, such as, "I just thought, doctor, since it's raining outside, you'd open your umbrella in the living room before you go out." The explanation is obviously inadequate and made on the spur of the moment to offer some reason for his senseless behavior. It is evident, for us the spectators, that he ignores his real motive. However, we know what it is, because we were present when the suggestion that he now performs was made to him, while he knows nothing of the act that is in action. The question of the relation of the conscious to the psychic can now be considered established. Consciousness is only a quality or attribute of what is psychic, but an inconstant quality. But there is another objection that we must clear up. We are told that, despite the facts we have mentioned, it is not necessary to abandon the identity between what is conscious and what is psychic. The so-called unconscious psychic processes are the organic processes that have long been recognized as running parallel to mental processes. This would naturally reduce our problem to an apparently trivial question of definition. Our answer is that it would be unjustified and improper to break the unity of mental life in order to achieve a definition, since in any case it is clear that consciousness can only offer us an incomplete and broken chain of phenomena. And it would be a matter of luck that even though the change had been made in the definition of the psychic, it would not be possible to build a comprehensive and coherent theory of mental life. Nor is it necessary to suppose that this alternative vision of the psychic is an innovation due to psychoanalysis. A German philosopher, Theodor Lipps, stated most clearly that the psychic is itself unconscious and that the unconscious is what is truly psychic. The concept of the unconscious has long been knocking on the doors of psychology to be allowed entry. Philosophy and literature have often played with it, but science has not found how to use it. Psychoanalysis has accepted the concept, has taken it seriously and has given it content. New. With his investigations he has come to a knowledge of the characteristics of the unconscious psychic that were hitherto unsuspected and has discovered some of the laws that govern it. But none of this implies that the quality of being conscious has lost its importance for us. It continues to be the light that illuminates our path and leads us through the darkness of mental life. As a consequence of the special character of our discoveries, our scientific work in psychology will consist in translating unconscious processes into conscious processes, thus filling the gaps in conscious perception. End. Some elementary lessons of psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud.